Yes, and on that note also now there was a comprehensive victory when it came to defeating the terrorists. So if you take the United Nations UNP role in that, how do you see the role of the UNP and the perception of the UNP in the context of winning the war to defeating the terrorists would go down in history when it comes to the community, that is Sri Lanka, the Sinhalese, Tamil and also the Muslims? How would they view the role of UNP in the context of defeating terrorism?
Well, I think the UNP is a great party. I think the UNP tried to defeat terrorism under most of its leaders. It lost many leaders at the hands of the LTT, including some of its greatest leaders like President Premadasa, with whom I worked. But if you're talking about the UNP under Mr. Wickremesinghe, the present leader, I think the whole country agrees that it was during his time that the Tigers were strengthened. Why do I say this? Because at the time that he entered the ceasefire agreement, the Sri Lankan Armed Forces deep penetration teams, trained by General Gamini Hettiarachchi, had gone into the Vanni and had killed 6 top LTT leaders, including Shankar, Colonel Shankar. We signed the ceasefire agreement at that time. In other words, when the LTTE was in trouble. It was also the post-9/11 period when the global atmosphere was against terrorism, and we could very well have got the support of the world to crush the Tigers. But instead, we signed a ceasefire agreement. That ceasefire agreement was lopsided because we agreed to disarm the Tamil groups who were with us, to whom we had given arms to defend themselves, but we didn't ask for a single bullet to be returned by the Tigers. So it is during this period that the Sri Lankan Armed Forces were most dispirited. And I think history has given a verdict on that. Now, what is happening today is that this UNP leadership and those forces who were in fact pro-LTTE, because even during the last stages of the war, the UNP leadership was not supportive of the war. But this UNP leadership has been able to disguise itself by using General Fonseca, who is a genuine war hero, as a kind of a human shield. And then you have the JVP, which of course played a good role against the CFA and during the war, patriotic role. But we also remember the mayhem that it created in the late 80s in Sri Lanka, and the threats to the armed forces personnel, the threats to the families, the killings of families of certain armed forces personnel and so on. So they too are kind of maneuvering with General Fonseca in front. And you have the TNA, which, as I said, the UK Independence clearly says is the Tamil Tigers, the Tamil Tigers Front Organization. The TNA is trying to do the same thing. So if you look at these 3 forces, the 2 main forces, the UNP and the TNA, played a very, very clear and negative role during the war. And now we have been given the choice of electing basically of rewarding them and throwing out Mahinda Rajapaksa, who won the war, by giving political leadership to the war. So we are supposed to throw out the man who gave political leadership to this victory and bring in, behind the genuine war hero, those forces, one which supported the Tigers directly, and the other which supported and helped and sympathized with the Tigers and strengthened them indirectly, including giving telecommunication equipment and so on and so forth. So this is a very strange situation.
Yes, we are speaking to Dr. Dayan Jayathilake and you're watching Roundtable. So he has just illustrated the happenings of the political scene in a very interesting light, because he's telling how the retired general is also sort of used as a human shield to some extent, and it looks as if he's the war hero, but at the same time, if you look at the background forces, the UNP and the TNA, they are also 2 forces that definitely had a very negative impact in the process of defeating terrorism. So by supporting and canvassing for the retired general, you're also advocating parties who had extreme detrimental effect on the entire defeating of the terrorism. So in one sense, you are trying, the choice that we are faced with, according to Dr. Dayan Jayathilake, is that we are given a choice to throw out a leader who gave the political leadership to genuinely defeat the terrorist organization for the alternative of a force who did everything, a lot of things in the most negative manner to stop the war and not let the Sri Lankans as a whole reap the benefits of a country free of terrorism. So that's a very, a very interesting way of looking at the political situation, because it sort of puts everything into perspective when we look at the background forces and look at the leaders who are in front of the forces that sort of represent them. And so what are your suggestions? How should we build this country, rebuild this country? What do you think is the way forward?
Well, look, we were able to celebrate New Year this year in a way that we haven't for ages. There were firecrackers going off everywhere. People were partying freely on Golfers Green and so on. I mean, just remember the situation a year or two ago. Remember the 30 years we went through. Frankly, you couldn't even buy firecrackers because it was a security risk. Now, that's yesterday and today. That's the difference. And to whom do we owe this in the main? We owe it to a number of people, including General Fonseca, but in the main, we owe it to Mahinda Rajapaksa. Because General Fonseca couldn't give orders to the Navy or to the Air Force. And there was a great role played by all three services. So it had to be somebody above that, not any one of the service chiefs, but somebody above that. And there is clearly the Commander-in-Chief and the Secretary of Defense, mostly the Commander-in-Chief. President Rajapaksa stopped the international efforts by very powerful countries to halt the war. The Army Commander couldn't have done that. That could only be done by the political leadership. And President Rajapaksa did that. So now, here's a man who's enabled us to actually celebrate New Year freely after decades, and we are supposed to throw him out of his job? I mean, I was thrown out of my job after doing a good job, and I think it's a bad thing, whoever did it. I don't like to see that happening to anybody else. If it's wrong to have been done to me, it's certainly wrong to be done to Mahinda Rajapaksa as well. I mean, he's done a great job in tackling the main problem that we had. Not every problem, the main problem. That stopped every president. Jaya Jayawardena, Ranasinghe Premadasa, Chandrika Kumaratunga, nobody could really fulfill their vision for the country because of the LTT and Prabhakaran. Mahinda Rajapaksa defeated that. He gave the political leadership to do that. Now, there are also weaknesses. There are many things that we are frustrated by concerning the government. But that's to do with the government. That's to do with issues of governance. Mahinda Rajapaksa has been a very good leader. But there have been, there's a whole lot of problems to do with bad governance. This is true, we have to admit this. But that problem you can tackle, we can tackle together at the parliamentary election. You see, if you have a tummy ache, there's absolutely no reason to undergo brain surgery, neurosurgery. The presidential election is to do with the leadership of the country. Most of our problems, I've listened to all the criticisms, and I agree with many of the opposition criticisms. But most of those opposition criticisms are not about Mahinda Rajapaksa. So why should we throw him out? I'd say re-elect Mahinda Rajapaksa for the second term because he's the best of the available choices. I mean, he's no Barack Obama. He's no Kevin Rudd. But he's the best of the available choices to lead our country, to safeguard our sovereignty, and to consolidate the political gains of the military victory, preventing the Tamil Tigers overseas and the TNA from achieving the objective which is very clear. But on issues of economic development, nepotism, dynastic politics, corruption, bad governance, we have our chance. And that's the parliament election. Let's not get the two things confused and make the same mistake that the Tamil people made. The Tamil people chose a warrior, a warlord as their leader, Velupille Prabhakaran. And for a while they thought, they were on an upswing. They turned away from their lawyer politicians